Hi everyone! Based on your feedback from the June 7th PA Day, the Learning and Teaching team would like to go through a few examples of how the points do matter when entering assignments into Gradebook. This is an overview so that collectively we have a better understanding of the math at play when inputting data into Gradebook and how the grade is determined in the program. So welcome to Gradebook, Points Matter. I have created a fake class to demonstrate how the denominator or the total points assigned per task that you enter into Aspen, how it has an effect on the overall mark. So I'm going to go into the class and I've created some fake categories here. So I have a culminating activity category that's worth 30 and then 4 other categories that have various weights. I will look at the assignment category first to show how the denominator can affect the mark. So if I go into scores, now up at the top, you want to make sure that you select the assignment category. You can look at all of them, but I just want to look at one category at a time. So if I select assignment, and here, make sure you go to all. Now you will see all 7 assignments that I've entered into Aspen. So each of these assignments has a different point value. So the first was out of 38 points, 25 points, 8 points, and so on. So I put in some fake marks for Brooke. I put all level 4 marks. And now for Jennifer, I'm going to put in the exact same marks as Brooke, except that Jennifer did not hand in this mind map. So I'll put a 0 there. Now the mind map was only worth 8 points, was only out of 8 points. So you can see that by not adding it in or getting a 0, it affected the mark, but only by 4%. So it brought the mark down by to 85. For John, I'm going to put in the same amounts as Brooke, as the first student. But in this case, John didn't do the Kahoot, which was 26 points. So I'll put a 0 for that. And the effect on the overall mark now is 10%. So it went from 89 down to a 79. And that's because the Kahoot was out of 26 points, whereas the mind map was only out of 8 points. So depending on the point value that you assign for each of your assignments, it does have a greater or less effect on the overall mark of that category. In this example, I'm going to go into the test and quizzes category, which is worth 20% of the final mark. So when I go into the scores, I want to make sure that I'm at test and quizzes, and I want to see all of the assignments. So here I have 3 tests and 2 quizzes, and they're all worth the same because they're all out of 100 points. So if you have something that looks like this, you want to ask yourself, do you want these all to be equally weighted? Is a quiz worth the same amount as a test? So I'm going to show you how this affects the overall mark. So Brooke, again, has overall level 4s on each of these 5 assessments. For Jennifer, she's going to have the same marks for the 3 tests, but she bombed the first quiz, or maybe not bombed, but maybe she got 40% on that first quiz. So that one change brought her mark down 10% in this category, and that was on a quiz. So if John now, maybe John got the same mark on test 1, but then he didn't do so well on test 2. He got 40% on test 2, but then did the same on all of the other assessments. So his mark is also 76. So is that what you want? Should Jennifer have the same mark as John, even though she bombed a quiz and John bombed a test? So when everything is out of the same amount of points within a category, that means that they have the same weight. So in this case, there are 5 assignments and the overall category was worth 20%. So each of these is worth 4% of the final mark. So should a quiz be worth 4% of the final mark, and that is the same as a test, that's 4% of a final mark. So that's something to consider if you have everything out of the same amount of points. In this example, I'll demonstrate how the overall percentage changes within a category when you change the total points given per assignment. So I'm going to go back into the tests and quizzes category. I want to make sure that I can see all of my assessments. So right now they are all equally weighted. They're all out of 100 points. But I'm going to change this quiz to be out of 25 points. So I'll make it worth much less. So I'll delete the initial scores, which were 91% and 40%. I'm going to keep these same values, but it'll be out of 25. So I've already calculated the math. So 91% out of 25, that would be 22.75. And then 40% would be 10 out of 25. So we can see how the point values have changed. So it affected all 3 percentages. So Brooke initially had 86, that went down to 85. Jennifer had 76, and now she has 82 because that quiz is worth much less. And John has 73, where previously he had 76. So I've made a pie chart just to demonstrate how that changed the marks. So in the first instance, each of the tests and quizzes had an equal value. So they were all out of 100. So that means they all had an equal piece of the pie. So the test and quizzes category was 20% of the overall mark. And each of those tests and quizzes makes up 20% of that 20%. In the second example, when the quiz was out of 100 or out of 25 points, now each of those pieces of the pie has changed. So quiz 1 is worth much less now, meaning each of the 4 other assignments are worth a little bit more. And you can see here that now each of those are worth 23.5% instead of 20. And quiz 1 is worth 6% of that category. So the amount of points that you assign to each assignment in your gradebook does affect the overall mark. For this next example, I'm going to go into the project categories, which is worth 25% of the overall mark. So when I hit scores, I want to make sure that I'm in the project category, and I want to see all of the assessments that I've entered into this category. So I put 4 fake projects in this category, and this time I put the total points into small, medium, and large categories. So my small projects were 25 points, the medium projects were out of 50 points, and the large project was out of 100 points. So say I was using a rubric, whatever percentage they got on the rubric, I then had to convert that into a fraction that had the appropriate denominator. So for Brooke, I put in some fake marks that are all at the level 4 area. And what I'll do is add some marks in for Jennifer. So Jennifer got the same amount of marks on all of the projects, except for project 3, where Jennifer didn't do so well. She only got 20% on this project, which when converted turns into 10 out of 50. And so the effect on her mark is that it brought it down by 16%. So compared to Brooke, now Jennifer is at a 70. And that was for 20% on a medium project. For John, he didn't do so well on the first project. He got 20% on the first project. So when converted, that's 5 out of 25. But then did very well on the other 3 projects, got the same marks as Brooke. And his mark is 79, so it only went down by 7%. So it had less of an effect on his mark. What happens if you only have one entry in a category or no entries at all? I will go into the journals category, which is worth 10% of the mark. And you can see right now there are no assignments showing, and I'm going to add one assignment. So just call this journal 1, and maybe it was out of 10 points. All right, so now I have my one assignment in the journal category. I'll just put a couple marks in here. And so this is worth 10 points, but if there's only one entry, that makes up 100% of this category. So the overall mark for the category would be the same as the entry. Now what happens is that this will heavily affect the overall mark, the final mark in the class. So I've made a pie chart to demonstrate this. If we look at the first pie chart, it has the categories. So all 4 categories are there, which make up the overall mark, and journals is in yellow, worth 10%. In the pie chart on the right, it's broken down further into each assignment placed in each category. So the culminating activity had 3 assignments. The projects, there was 4 entries. Now journals only had 1 entry. So that's making up 10% of the overall mark, that one assignment. So you want to be careful when you have a bucket or a category that only has 1 entry in it. Similarly to that, if you had journals as a category but didn't put anything into it, so if we go back and delete this assignment, so maybe there was no assignment entered at all for that category, even though it's entered here as a category, if nothing is in it, then it's not going to count towards the final mark, and it'll make each of these other categories worth a little bit more. So I've made a second set of pie charts here for that. So you can see in the top one, the journals category is 10% in yellow, and in the pie chart below it, it's been removed because there was no entries. And that makes each of these other categories, the 4 other ones, worth a little bit more. So the culminating is supposed to be worth 30, but now it's actually worth 33. Projects is supposed to be 25, now it's worth 28%. And if we look at the pie charts to the right, showing each of the individual assignments, each of those individual assignments will now be worth slightly more in the overall mark. So it's almost more dangerous to only have 1 entry in a category, because then that 1 assignment will be heavily weighted in the final mark for the course. If you would like additional support on how to calculate marks so that they have the weightings you desire, please consult the video resources available on your Aspen homepage, consult a colleague, or reach out to a learning coach.